The new year is a time of goals and fantasies for most, trying to accomplish anything to become their best selves, and for me, the book that best exemplifies that sense of peace and fantasy and tranquility is Lord of the Rings. It's strange that this series has such a weird and convoluted structure to it. So Brandon Sanderson says that
opening chapters give the promise of what the story is going to be about. Your story is plot, setting, character tied together by conflict. The box is how you see this. I'm going to decide based on genre, the type of story I want to write, and just what strikes me, which of these to pick.
And Lord of the Rings does this up front in the first page with the poem of the ring. I can't think of any better way to establish the dark and mysterious tone that the series will take on. The sense of language present ever throughout, the sense of mythology and prophecy is established all in that one page, that one line. And then we have an entire prologue full of hobbits. The start of Lord of the Rings is like, when the earth was young and the sun shone forth from the sky, the great sky master took behold.
And meanwhile here, the Rathyar people, they mostly like cabbages, and they were not participating in any wars for 77 years, but they have a bit of conflict. And now that that's all out of the way,
I think it's time to go to a birthday party! Which is really 3 intros. The first one is the poem of the ring, and that establishes mythology, poetry, and a dark prophecy kind of feeling. The second one is the prologue, which is nerdy historical details about very small facets of the world, which show it's going to be immersive and thought up, like, more than, oh my god. And the third one is the actual start of the book, which is happy, merry, fun family adventures. Jumping from poetry to historical exposition in a prologue that lasts for 18 pages is one hell of an ask. Somehow that does appropriately set expectations for the feeling of The Lord of the Rings. The feeling that this story gives in my heart, it really feels like it's made by someone who cares a little too much. And that sense of earnestness and kind of hokey love is what I really respect it for, as well as all the love of nature, and that love, it feels so nice to just bask in this book. Especially here in COVID times, I have found that this is as good as going outside for me. But before that, I jumped back into The Hobbit, which is fourth wall breaking, and it feels like Mr. Rogers is writing it. A lot of the descriptions in the book are things like, "And Elrond, the master of the house, was their chief. He was as noble and as fair in face as an elf lord, as strong as a warrior and as wise as a wizard, as venerable as a king of dwarves, and as kind as summer. He comes into many tales, but his part in the story of Bilbo's great adventure is only a small one, though important, as you will see, if we ever get to the end of it," assigning the value of good to what he was doing. So I found it interesting that Tolkien decided that his characters were the ones who were writing this account of their adventure after they were done. Tolkien did really interesting things with narrative voice by declaring that Bilbo was the author of The Hobbit,
which doesn't actually work because he references being a big person and also modern English culture, but I'll assume that there's a in-universe equivalent with those things removed.
And he's also the first author in the Red Book of Westmarch, which is the in-universe account of Lord of the Rings. He starts doing a couple of the detailed notes at the start, then Frodo takes over, does 80 chapters and looks at some appendices, then hands it to Sam, who finishes it off, which might explain why Sam looks the best at the very, very end. Bilbo also allegedly wrote the Silmarillion after compiling a bunch of notes from all of his adventures, though I can't help imagining him interviewing Galadriel and her giving the most biased account in favor of the elves possible. So as I'm noticing these narrative voice choices, I start looking for any other hints in the text that might link back to his previous works. My wife and I were talking about these books as I was reading them, and she actually noticed that when Boromir was first introduced, he kind of speaks in an old-fashioned style and rhythm, kind of like an Arthurian knight, and he kind of has this honor thing going. And then Minas Tirith is this Castle of White, making me think of Camelot. Galadriel, Lady Lothlorien, is she the Lady of the Lake? At that point, I'm kind of stretching because I'm reading Gawain and the Green Knight, which, for the record, Tolkien's translation is hokey and fantastic. It has lines like, "The mare was green and golden fair, with a messy tousled hair." Like, it's rhyming everything. The description of the paintings in the thing. It's really fun. I really like the translation. However, if you prefer Armitage's translation, it is free on audible.com with a Prime membership. and that will actually be like a more readable version, but just not quite as hokey fun, which is, if I'm reading Arthurian legend, I'm doing it for the scribompelin, much like with Robin Hood. So I'll get to the classics probably some other week. I've been doing writing exercises to figure out Tolkien's style, both to develop my own style as a writer and to understand his work better. Specifically, I've been doing an echo exercise as specified by DIANE CALLAHAN, the quotidian writer. Her echo exercise, or imitation exercise I should call it, comes in 3 parts. The first is taking 15 minutes to write down the first couple pages of whatever book you're reading while saying it out loud and copying every particle or whatever as well. This is to just get a feel for the rhythm and the flow and make sure that you're getting how it sounds out loud as well. The second thing is to take 10 minutes just describing what you would do to imitate such a thing, with the idea of that phase to come up with a writing prompt for you as well. For my Tolkien writing, I came up with how do you have narration and history that sets up the character and the place that character fits in the world, for The Hobbit at least. For Fellowship of the Ring, I had how do you have 3 introductions that set a tone for a book without boring the reader. A poem about myth and prophecy is fast and concise and also expresses some culture. History after that, or some grandiose high-scale thing, is almost like setting the scene. Then a personal story after that, I really like this Tolkien technique. You then take 10 minutes to actually try and implement that, and you're done. If you have to take time afterwards to refine it, that's okay. With the study of Tolkien's work for writing, I've noticed that he tends to use a couple trademarks things in his styles. He likes to use parentheses to put sardonic or like witty, sarcastic inferences in the text. For example, Bilbo liked all of his family, parentheses, except the Sackville Bagginses. In The Hobbit, he tends to use M-dashes and asides to the reader in order to say how they should feel about it or to give more detail. And then bam, you're done. Don't worry, I won't share what I actually wrote unless you all request it. Instead, I'll take the rest of my time to continue to nerd out about Lord of the Rings. I think what keeps me coming back to Lord of the Rings after all this time is just the consistency in which it makes me feel that adrenaline combined with that sense of peace and hope. I feel there is a sense of getting better. I feel that there is a sense of glory and majesty in the world. Majestic, I would say, is the biggest thing. The way that the voice tends to grandiosely slow down in the text in order to talk about every leaf and every bend in the river and every event that shook the foundations of the earth between the goblins and the dwarves, in order to wind along the river path as you go over the long dead corpses and the dead marshes, while you simultaneously have this place you want to defend in Hobbiton, which has a history eerily similar to England. That sort of majesty being expressed in the slow pace of the prose makes me feel a sense of cutting relaxation that no matter how shitty the world is going, I can turn back to. I'm so happy that this became the basis of, granted, a lot of terrible fantasy knockoffs, but a couple good ones too. Like, geez, Wheel of Time. Wheel of Time would not exist without that. I'm not just saying that because it practically opens with a ring wraith. It allegedly plays with the tropes so well, but I haven't read more than like 30 pages, so I'll get back to you on that. Actually, I don't know what to read next week. It was going to be Game of Thrones. It feels too real now. So I'm just going to read a smattering of different books, and y'all can tell me which ones you prefer me to focus on after that. I think that that's going to be cool. I can't wait to see you then. I hope you've enjoyed this look into my nerdy little psyche. And I will see you all next week. Oh, and I didn't get around to reading Tolkien's translation of Beowulf. I've heard that it's more prose-oriented, so I imagine that I'll like Seamus Heaney's version more, but my favorite version of all time is definitely going to be Beowulf, written by Neil Gaiman, which is a version of Beowulf in the Baywatch universe, with an introduction that says, quote, "I don't make fun of where you get your ideas."